Greetings and welcome to this meditative time together again today. I'm Kent Fish from First Christian Church here in San Angelo, Texas. And as you know, though we can't be together physically, our church is alive and well, practicing two of the crucial arms of the spiritual life, that of contemplation and action. Our contemplative lives have continued to be nourished online through music and prayer and worship experiences several times a week. And our church is continuing to be active in the community. This past week, providing food for 126 local families from our food pantry at our downtown location. We are grateful for your continued support of these ministries during these uncertain times. And we're happy to provide this weekly mini retreat at home, during which we are exploring and expanding our concepts of prayer through poetry. We're using this book, Love Poems from God, by Daniel Ladinsky. He's a poet who has translated works of ancient mystics that we're looking at and reading. I want to remind anyone can get this book online just from Amazon if you would like to read along with us as we are examining these various famous poets. And then we're also augmenting that with poetry from contemporary present-day poets that help us to enhance our connection to the divine through poetry. It seems during this time of social isolation, many are wanting to spend time for learning and spiritual deepening. Father Thomas Keating reminds us God is totally committed to the transformation of each of us into God's self. So, as we begin our meditation today, I invite you to place yourself in a prayerful mood of receptivity, quiet, open to the presence of the Holy. We will begin today with music from a contemporary composer from Estonia. His name is Arvo Pärt. We will listen to his powerful Magnificat. In recent days, we've just had the Lyrid meteor shower. So just imagine yourself laying outside at night, watching the meteor shower. Place yourself in a prayerful mood as we listen to the music and watch the images. Today we will be reading from probably the two most famous mystics and poets, spiritual mentors of their time and maybe even to this time, one from the East and one from the West. We will look at the Sufi dervish mystic known as Rumi and some of his poetry from the East, and from the West, probably the most famous, popular saint, Saint Francis of Assisi. With our Earth Day celebration having just been taken place, the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, it's probably appropriate to do Saint Francis today. As you know, he is a very common image in gardens where he is holding a bird or has a bird on his shoulder. He's the patron saint of animals and ecology. Let me give you a quick summary of his life. He was born in 1182 and is felt to be the most beloved saint of the Western world. He's famous for his love of nature and his hymns to the sun, the moon, the earth, and the birds. He was born in Assisi, which is in central Italy, and he was born into a family of a wealthy linen merchant. He had a life of wealth and went off to fight in the Crusades. He thought he wanted to be a knight. He returned home and decided that he wanted to have a quiet life. He had several visions during his life, and this turned him toward God. The famous story is that he was out at a small chapel in the country outside of Assisi, meditating and praying, and there was an icon of the crucified Christ there that spoke to him, saying, "Francis, go and repair my house, which, as you can see, is falling into ruins." So he took that to mean this ruined church that he was sitting near, and so he went and got some of his father's cloth from his father's store. He sold it and used that money to give to the priest in that church. His father did not like that, and so Francis had to go hide in a cave for a month or so. He came back to town dirty and hungry, was dragged by his father into town, and was disowned by his father. So Francis renounced his father, took off his clothes, and stood there naked in the streets, and became a beggar. So he went around and helped restore the small churches around Assisi. He gathered a group of followers living with him in poverty, and after that went to see the Pope in Rome, took a pilgrimage, and was granted the founding of a new monastic order, the Franciscan orders, which is one of the largest orders in the Catholic Church today. It's called the Friars Minor. He grew that tradition and, of course, is a very popular saint today. So let's read some of his writings. He did preach that your God is of your flesh. God lives in your nearest neighbor, in every person. This is a common theme of these mystics. God, the divine, the holy, within each of us. He talked about brother sun, sister moon. He actually also was the first one to use a manger scene at Christmas time. The familiar creches that we use at Christmas. We start with one called He Asked for Charity. God came to my house and asked for charity. And I fell on my knees and cried, Beloved, what may I give? Just love, God said. Just love. A kind face. Joy is the greatest cleanser, and it is the greatest testimony to our faith. Toil with happiness, my Lord once said to me. God sent a servant on an errand through a dangerous part of the world. The servant, having received in hand what God wanted delivered, turned to the holy and said, My beloved master, do you have a final instruction? And God replied, A kind face is a precious gift. A short one to think about. Can true humility and compassion exist in our words and eyes unless we know we too are capable of any act? Can we examine ourselves knowing we might be capable of any act? One about our present state of affairs as well as in the past, called Always from the Child's Hand. Always from the child's hand, the sword should be removed. I think every nation is an infant. That would be a nice one to follow if we only could. Here's one about God working in the least of these, called No One Knows His Name. No one knows his name. O man who lives on the streets and walks around in rags. Once I saw that man in a dream. He and God were constructing an extraordinary temple. God working through everyone. This one from St. Francis is called God Would Kneel Down. I think God might be a little prejudiced. For once God asked me to join God on a walk through this world. And we gazed into every heart on this earth. And I noticed God lingered a little bit longer before any face that was weeping, and before any eyes that were laughing. And sometimes when we passed a soul in worship, God too would kneel down. I have come to learn God adores God's creation. God's a little bit prejudiced toward creation and everything in it. This one's called Anyone Who Suffered. I would not leave this earth until God promised me that my hands could always touch the face of anyone who suffered. Francis spent his life amongst the poor and as a poor man of poverty, serving others. Here's one about God, the divine comforter, if we can only accept it. If all the tenderness in this world could reflect from my eyes, would you accept that love? If all the forgiveness the heavens have known could be offered from one face, would you accept that divine pardon? In God's sublime sanity, every moment God offers that to us. Anything that might comfort. Do we accept that love, that forgiveness, that pardon, that comfort? Here's one that has a little bit of what has been known to be the prayer of St. Francis. Let me be an instrument of your peace where there is pardon, etc. It turns out he probably didn't write that, but it has been written from his other writings. This one, though, is called Our Need for Thee. In our ever-present need for Thee, Beloved, let us know your peace. Let us be your instruments that break every shackle. Give us our inheritance of divine love so that we can forgive like you. And let us be wise. And this is a nice image. God is like a honeybee. God doesn't mind me calling God that. For when you are kind, sweet, God nears and can draw you into God's self. Here's one for those of us who have animals and who enjoy the creatures of the earth. Does every creature have a soul? A tool in your hand I am, dear God, the sweetest instrument you have shaped my being into. What makes me now complete, feeling the soul of every creature against my heart. Does every creature have a soul? Surely they do, for anything God has touched will have life forever, and all creatures God has held. See if you can wrap your head around this one. It's called Wring Out My Clothes. Such love does the sky now pour that whenever I stand in a field, I have to wring out the light when I get home. A short one, reaffirming to us God's admiration. God's admiration for us is infinitely greater than anything we can conjure up for God. Does God admire you more than you admire God? Here's one that is a common theme, the idea of the holy or the sacred in all things. This one's called In All Things. It was easy to love God in all that was beautiful. The lessons of deeper knowledge, though, instructed me to embrace God in all things. Is only that which is beautiful from God, or the sacred or holy in all things. This one might be my favorite. You can see what you think. Once again, the idea of the holy in the ordinary. It's called the sacraments. I once spoke to my friend, an old squirrel, about the sacraments. he got so excited, and he ran into a hollow in his tree and came back holding some acorns, an owl feather, and a ribbon he had found. And I just smiled and said, "Yes, dear, you understand. Everything imparts God's grace. The holy, the sacred, God's grace in the ordinary." The question is, do we see it in an acorn, an owl feather, a ribbon? The squirrel got it. This one's called The Result of Prayer. The result of prayer is life. Prayer irrigates the earth and heart. And this last one from St. Francis, letting us understand again the closeness of God in everything. It's called Dear God. Dear God, please reveal to us your sublime beauty that is everywhere, 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 so that we will never again feel frightened. My divine love, my love, please let us touch your face. That closeness of God everywhere that eliminates fear. Moving on to the Eastern tradition, let's read a few from the famous Sufi dervish mystic known as Jalaluddin Rumi. Rumi was a contemporary of St. Francis. He was born in 1207. He's considered one of the greatest poets known to history. His influence throughout the Islamic world for over 700 years, and more recently in Western countries, is astounding. He's currently one of the most widely read poets in the English language. Looking him up online, I found an article from a couple of years ago from the BBC, and its title it was, "Why is Rumi the best-selling poet in the U.S.?" It was trying to explain why this person that lived 813 years ago was so popular in our country. Rumi was born in Afghanistan, part of the Persian Empire, back in 1207. He had to move around some with his family early on because Genghis Khan and the Mongol armies came through at that time. But he ended up in Turkey, where he lived the rest of his life. His father was a scholar and a mystic and was head of a divinity school, a dervish college. Rumi succeeded to that position when his father died. And the famous story about Rumi and his spiritual life is when, in his 30s, he met a man known as Shams, S-H-A-M-S. Shams was a wandering dervish from Tabriz. He was wandering in a quest to find a spiritual companion that he could bequeath his legacy to. And he found Rumi. And Rumi, from that moment on, began living this sacred experience. He realized that he had come face to face with the doorway to God and began this relationship of divine union. This one named Shams, who was his teacher, suddenly disappeared as suddenly as he had appeared. And at this time, Rumi began his writing of poetry. Rumi also began to blissfully dance with his poems. They said he would dance around whirling and recite his poems for someone to write down, and became the founder of what we know now is called the whirling dervishes of the Sufi tradition. So he was their founder. He wrote very much poetry. It's been translated by a man named Coleman Barks. There are many books on Rumi's poetry. I'm going to start with one that comes not from this book, but that is called Out Beyond Ideas of Wrongdoing and Right Doing. This is from the Sufi poet Rumi. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there's a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other doesn't make any sense. A poem about unity and intimacy and belonging. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing. If we could only find that field. Here's one from Rumi, a short one called Where Am I Going? Where am I going on this glorious journey? To your house, of course. Here's a call to live life with passion. With passion, pray. With passion, work. With passion, make love. With passion, eat and drink and dance and play. Why look like a dead fish in this ocean of God? Live your life with passion. Don't be a dead fish. This one called Isn't That Something? See if you get the imagery here. I like when the music happens like this. Something in God's eye grabs hold of a tambourine in me. And then I turn and lift a violin in someone else. And they turn, and this turning continues. It has reached you now. Isn't that something? Inciting the music in others. This one, another common theme of living in the present. It's called That Lives in Us. This one is for all you fellow kayakers out there. If you put your hands on this oar with me, they will never harm another. And they will come to find that they hold everything you want. If you put your hands on this oar with me, they would no longer lift anything to your mouth that might wound your precious land, that sacred earth that is your body. If you put your soul against this oar with me, the power that made the universe will enter your sinew from a source not outside your limbs, but from a holy realm that lives in us. Exuberant is existence, time, a husk. When the moment cracks open, ecstasy leaps out and devours space. Love goes mad with the blessings, like my words give. Why lay yourself on the torturer's rack of the past and the future? The mind that tries to shape tomorrow beyond its capabilities will find no rest. Be kind to yourself, dear, to our innocent follies. Forget any sounds or touch you knew that did not help you dance. You will come to see that all evolves us. If you put your heart against the earth with me in serving every creature, our beloved will enter you from our sacred realm, and we will be so happy. That's a nice one. That idea of God, the universal, the cosmic Christ living in each of us, in everything, if we can only live in the present. Why lay yourself on the torturer's rack of the past and the future? You will find no rest. Living in this moment. Not an easy task, but one that we can all work on. Here's another one that has to do with the idea of where is God, what is sacred, what is holy. If God said, Rumi, pay homage to everything that has helped you enter my arms, there would not be one experience of my life, not one thought, not one feeling, nor any act I would not bow to. Is it possible that every experience, every thought, every feeling, every act is sacred? Every sacred act has helped you enter my arms. The sacred in the ordinary. Here's one I think he wrote for us during this time. This is for all of us who are sheltering with another. Here is a relationship booster that is guaranteed to work. Every time your spouse or lover says something stupid, make your eyes light up as if you just heard something brilliant. So remember that one. Here's one also about living in the now, living in the present. It's called A Chance of Humming. A man standing on 2 logs in a river might do all right floating with the current while humming in the now. Though if one log is tied to a camel who was also heading south along the bank at the same pace, all could still be well with the world. Unless the camel thinks he forgot something and abruptly turns upstream, and then, uh-oh. Most minds do not live in the present and can stick to a reasonable plan. Most minds abruptly turn and undermine the chance of humming. Do our minds have that camel that turns and unminds our chance of humming? And here's one called the silkworm. I stood before a silkworm one day, and that night my heart said to me, I can do things like that. I can spin skies. I can be woven into love that can bring warmth to people. I can be soft against a crying face. I can be wings that lift, and I can travel on my 1,000 feet throughout the earth, my sacks filled with the sacred. And I replied to my heart, "Dear, can you really do all those things?" And it just nodded yes in silence. So we began, and will never cease. This is a nice one. I think about this first and last phrase. Listen carefully. On a day when the wind is perfect, the sail just needs to open and the world is full of beauty. Today is such a day. My eyes are like the sun that makes promises, the promise of life that it always keeps, each morning. The living heart gives to us as does the luminous sphere. Both caress the earth with great tenderness. There's a breeze that can enter the soul. This love, I know, plays a drum. Arms move around me. Who can contain their self before my beauty? Peace is wonderful, but ecstatic dance is more fun and less narcissistic. Gregarious God makes our lips. On a day when the wind is perfect, the sail just needs to open and the love starts. Today is such a day. That might be a good one to say each morning upon awakening. On a day when the wind is perfect, the sail just needs to open and the world is full of beauty. Today is such a day. And a one that lets us ask us the question, do we illumine the world? It's called Huddled Beneath the Sky. The sadness I have caused any face by letting a stray word strike it. Any pain I have caused you, what can I do to make us even? Demand 100-fold of me, I'll pay it. During the day, I hold my feet accountable to watch out for wondrous insects and their dwellings. Why would I want to bring horror into their extraordinary world? Magnetic fields draw us to light. They move our limbs and thoughts, but it is still dark. If our hearts do not hold a lantern, we will stumble over each other, huddled beneath the sky as we are. Do our hearts hold a lantern to illumine ourselves and others? Here's one called, Can You Become Such a King? I want that kind of grace from God that when it hits, I won't get off the floor for days. And when I finally do stagger into a semblance of poise, I will still need a cane and a shoulder to help me walk. And I'll need great patience from any who try to decipher my slurred speech. You should forget about knowing the friend unless you are willing to kiss the world with great abandon. Locked like a pair of dogs openly making love in the streets, impervious to shouts and pails of water being thrown and glares from eyes that pass, can you become such an egoless king? Can we, through our spiritual practices, become egoless? You should forget about knowing the friend unless you are willing to kiss the world with great abandon. And this last one from Rumi. This could be called a poem from God, God talking to us. It's called It's Rigged. It's rigged, everything, in your favor. So there's nothing to worry about. Is there some position you want? Some office, some acclaim, some award, some con, some lover, maybe 2, maybe 3, maybe 4, all at once? Maybe a relationship with God? I know there is a gold mine in you. When you find it, the wonderment of the earth's gifts you will lay aside as naturally does a child a doll. But dear, how sweet you look to me, kissing the unreal. Comfort. Fulfill yourself in any way possible. Do that until you ache. You ache. Then come to me again. Do we spend our time kissing the unreal, trying to comfort ourselves? And I want to finish with a couple from a famous, popular American poet, Mary Oliver. Mary Oliver just died a few years ago, I think in 2017. She is, for many years, has been the most popular poet in America. I'll do a quick little introduction of her. She's the winner of the Pulitzer Prize in Poetry, the National Book Award winner, America's best-selling poet. She teaches us the profound act of paying attention. She connects to us, to the natural world. She transforms our everyday surroundings into a place of magic and discovery. She asks questions such as, what is holy? Who are we? What are we called to do with our lives? She says this about poetry. Poetry is prayer. It's passion and story and music. It's beauty, it's comfort, it's agitation, declaration. It is thanksgiving. She says, poetry does not work for everyone, but it works for the many who open themselves to it. Those who have been around me on kayak trips and backpacking adventures know that I like to start the morning each day before our activities with a Mary Oliver poem. I'm going to read one off of my Kindle from one of her newer books called 1,000 Mornings. It's called If I Were. There are lots of ways to dance and to spin. Sometimes it just starts at my feet first, and then my entire body. I'm spinning, no one can see it, but it's happening. I am so glad to be alive. I'm so glad to be loving and loved. Even if I were close to the finish, even if I were at my final breath, I would be here to take a stand, bereft of such astonishments, but for them. If I were a Sufi, for sure, I would be one of the spinning kind. So that's in honor of Rumi, the whirling dervish. Now one for Earth Day. This one's called Poem of the One World. This morning, the beautiful white heron was floating along above the water, And then into the sky of this, the one world we all belong to, where everything sooner or later is part of everything else. Which thought made me feel for a little while quite beautiful myself. This, the one world we all belong to, where everything sooner or later is part of everything else. And one called Today might help us to relate to these times of quietness and rest. Today I'm flying low, and I'm not saying a word. I'm letting all the voodoos of ambition sleep. The world goes on as it must. The bees in the garden rumble a little, the fish leaping, the gnats getting eaten, and so forth. But I'm taking the day off, quiet as a feather. I hardly move, though really I'm traveling a terrible distance. Stillness, one of the doors into the temple. The act of stillness, how we enter the temple. Probably maybe her most famous poem. As you can tell, she writes a lot about nature. She lived up in Massachusetts on the ocean and walked out every day with her notebook and wrote poems. This might be her most famous, called Wild Geese. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I'll tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things. And I'll finish with another one of her very popular poems called The Swan. Listen carefully. Did you too see it drifting all night on the Black River? Did you see it in the morning, rising into the silvery air, an armful of white blossoms, a perfect commotion of silk and linen as it leaned into the bondage of its wings, a snowbank, a bank of lilies, biting the air with its black beak? Did you hear it, fluting and whistling a shrill, dark music, like the rain pelting the trees, like a waterfall knifing down the black ledges? And did you see it, finally, just under the clouds, a white cross streaming across the sky, its feet like black leaves, its wings like the stretching light of the river? And did you feel it in your heart, how it pertained to everything? And have you too finally figured out what beauty is for? And have you changed your life? Today we will once again finish with music, with a song by Cody Carnes. It's called Nothing Else. Until next time, peace.
Caught up in your presence, I just wanna sit here at your feet. I'm caught up in this whole moment, I never wanna leave. Oh, I'm not here for blessing, Jesus, you don't owe me anything, and more than anything that you can do, I just want you. I'm sorry when I've just gone through the motions. I'm sorry when I just sang another song. Take me back to where we started. I open up my heart to you. Oh, I'm sorry when I've come with my agenda. I'm sorry when I forgot that you're enough. Take me back to where we started. I open up my heart to you. I'm caught up in your presence, I just wanna sit here at your feet. I'm caught up in this whole moment, I never wanna leave. Oh, I'm not here for blessings, Jesus, you don't owe me anything, and more than anything that you can do, I just want you. Oh, I just want you, and nothing else, and nothing else, nothing else will do. I just want you, and nothing else, and nothing else, oh, nothing else will do. I just want you, and nothing else, and nothing else, oh, nothing else will do. I just want you, oh, and nothing else, and nothing else, Jesus, and nothing else will do. I just want you, and nothing else, and nothing else, nothing else will do. I just want you, and nothing else, and nothing else, and nothing else will do. I'm caught up in your presence, just wanna sit here at your feet. I'm caught up in this whole moment. I never wanna leave. Oh, I'm not here for blessings. Jesus, you don't owe me anything. And more than anything that you can do, I just want you.